So great evening, everyone. I am Moses T. Alexander Green. I always start every program by saying I have the best job in the world, which is to curate experiences of dance, theater, music, film, and culture here at the North Carolina Museum of Art for not just our galleries, but also our 164-acre museum park. Tonight is one of our special events for me. When I came to the museum 3.5 years ago, the tour before I started that Monday, when we got to the Judaic Art Gallery, I asked that my director, Catherine White, that she would give me a moment because it felt like a sacred space. That happens to me often. Sometimes if I go into ancient Americas and I'll feel the sanctity of the culture. And so tonight is about a freedom Seder. Not a traditional Seder, a freedom Seder. Just as context, on the 1-year anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in Washington, D.C., 800 Christian Jewish leaders came together for a meal. And they came together to show unity of culture and to show that Jewish and African Americans in particular shared a similar history of going from struggle and slavery to liberation and to freedom. And so that is the intention for tonight. We've done it for the past 4 years. The first one with my good friends and my colleagues here, Virginia and Danny, we just did a traditional freedom Seder. This next year we did a feminist Seder. And then last year, again, based on Danny's help, we focused it on the land, and it was called The Tilling and the Telling of Freedom. Tonight, we're here to do a traditional Seder, freedom Seder, focused on freedom, i.e., the power and the presence of water. I am expecting great conversations. For some of us, this is our first Seder, and for others, it's our first freedom Seder. As a producer, I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but my intention is that we are unified and that we share in our collective humanity.
So I'm thrilled to be here at the North Carolina Museum of Art, and as I mentioned earlier to the docent groups, I'm so pleased that these Miriam's cups that I've created, which are like a kind of children to me. You know, you create them, you are with them intimately, touching them, modeling them, tweaking them, and then you send them out into the world. And when they go out into the world, they meet all kinds of people and they live in all kinds of places, and people interpret them differently and have an effect on them just as they have an effect on people. So I'm very pleased to have it be here, and I've already heard some interpretations from the docents today or questions people ask about it that really help move their interpretation forward and enrich hopefully everybody that comes in contact with them, and especially me hearing these things back from them. So I'll talk a little bit about the cups or about the Seder first, if that's okay. So the Passover Seder is really a home ritual that is one of the most celebrated and beloved Jewish holidays across the world, across time, and across Jewish families of all shapes and sizes. And really, it's not a meal so much as the table as a kind of symbolic landscape, meaning that we have ritual foods that stand for different stages in this story that we're telling, from the enslavement in Egypt under a despotic pharaoh, under very hard slave conditions, to liberation by miracles and divine presence out through the Red Sea and into the desert to wander until they reach their home in Israel. So it's a story that really has a lot of props on the table, and one kind of prop is the Seder plate, and these beautiful, made just for this Seder, I understand, by a local ceramic artists, with ritual foods that stand for different things. And the problem is, even though these represent many stages in the story, there was really never something that recognized the role of women, mostly in the form of Miriam, who really almost started the story off with her helping to save Moses. I know. The story's all about Moses. And, you know, when she was a young girl, first of all, encouraged her parents to have another child, because there was this edict in Egypt. Pharaoh had said, all male babies are going to be thrown into the sea and killed instantly upon birth. But Miriam sort of saw a future for the Jewish people, and that's why she's called a prophetess. She's really our cultural heroine, because she had that imagination to see forward, and that if more children were born and saved, as Moses was, there would be a way forward for the Jewish people out of enslavement and into freedom. So her first act, and I can just talk about this a little bit here. I'll just backtrack for a minute. So there's symbolic foods on the Seder plate, but Miriam had never had a place at the table. So the role of women really wasn't acknowledged in the way that other parts of the story were. And I came to realize, reading more and digging deeper into the texts, that she's intimately connected with water and different kinds of water throughout the story. So first she's connected with the Nile, and this is the Nile cup. And so it's actually a map of a part of the Nile. It's black because in the Torah, the enslavement in Egypt is recalled as an iron furnace. It was so hot and severe and harsh and inescapable that it was called an iron furnace. So I wanted to recall the blackness of the iron, as well as the basalt material that a lot of Egyptian religious sculptures were made out of. So I'm very interested in how material as well as design can help give a sense of placeness and spiritual import to the materials used themselves. So it's kind of the cup series is kind of an essay in ways of holding water and ways that Miriam interacted with water. So we have the Nile, which starts her on our story of the liberation of the people. Then we have, and this one I can't lift up because it's it's filled with water. Next, we see Miriam emerge at the Song of the Sea, when the Israelites have crossed through the miraculous parting of the Red Sea. They go through on dry land, here depicted in Jerusalem limestone. Again, a strong sense of placeness of material, kind of enriches the story. And on the other side of the sea, when the Jews have safely crossed, there's a victorious song of Moses and also of Miriam, who leads the women in dancing and song. So she's a musician as well as a prophetess. And then Miriam kind of disappears from the story a little bit, but reemerges in legends that come out of the text of the Torah, which is where this story is told, in the form of a miraculous well. The people traveling in the desert, they're hot and they're tired and they're overwhelmed, and they're crying for lack of water. But due to the merits of Miriam, her being such a heroic, active figure, a well is created miraculously that sort of bubbles up whenever the people need sustenance and nourishment and reviving. So this is the well. It's set in a bed of sand, and it's the only one in which you can take the cup out and drink from it, because the well is not time-bound to the story the way these other bodies of water are, the river and the sea. It's something that lives on and is available for us to dip into and nourish, and hopefully, bring us together in sustenance and future life and freedom. So this is the well in the sea. So that's kind of the story of the cups. They're a little unconventional, and they don't look like cups because really they're not supposed to be cups. They're supposed to be a symbol of the heroism of a woman whose foresight and energy and agency really helped propel the story forward.
So as we see so clearly in Amy's work, the Seder experience, the traditional Seder, the Freedom Seder, transcends across time. Ancient history is really of the moment, and the water is living, right? The water is a living element today and from the past and going forward. And the Seder reaches back deep into history, into ancient history, biblical history, formative history of peoplehood, and also reaches forward into a promised land, a promise of hope, and a promise of freedom and expansion for all. In the Seder traditional text, in the Haggadah, in the traditional liturgy of the Seder, we're called upon to actually time travel. We say that each and every person gathered together should remember and feel as if they themselves left Egypt. That the experience is not only something of the past, but it's something of the present and into the future. In every generation, we feel that experience fully, bodily, communally ourselves. The Haggadah also teaches and reminds us that in every generation, particularly the Jewish people, have had experiences of suffering, discrimination, hatred, persecution, and have survived and have been blessed through the divine with this hope and with the opportunity to reach and survive. In every generation, people have gathered together at the table for Seders of different types, and that Seder existed in the past, in the present, and in the future. And this year, like so many times across history, the present really is felt in the moment. We're at a time when we think about the experiences of peoplehood, the experiences of challenge, the experiences of loss, of captivity, of uncertainty in the Middle East and across the globe. And we hope for peace. We hope and pray for future. We hope and pray for survival. We mourn loss. We grieve for loss across communities. A time when really of suffering, we are feeling that. The water symbolism in the Seder is a water of rebirth, a water of Miriam. It's also traditionally, and one of the items in the Seder service is salt water. Salt water evoking the Red Sea, but salt water also evoking tears. Tears of suffering, tears of concern at this moment, concern in the past, hope and tears for a future that is better. So we think about today. We know today and this year the Seder is extra resonant, and we're worried. We grieve, we hope, but that's what the Seder does. It allows us to time travel, and these objects evoke that. They evoke the power of the past and the promise of the future and our concerns and our hopes that we say at this moment.
I'm Nancy Strickland Fields. I'm the director of the Museum of the Southeast American Indian in Pembroke, North Carolina, on the campus of the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. I'm a proud Lumby Indian, and I come from a landscape that informs our identity and culture, who we are as a people, and where we still live today on our homelands. Our homelands are uniquely bordered by the Lumby River, which is one of the black water rivers that is in eastern North Carolina. This is a sacred river to us, a sacred space, and has been for time immemorial. Native peoples have lived along this river. We revere this water. It is black water, and it's really interesting because the Lumby River has these really powerful and sometimes dangerous whirlpools that kind of churn through the current as it moves along, and it just adds this level of mystique and respect that we have for our water. Most of all, the river is a place of sustainability and sustenance for us. Our people have fished these waters, collected mussels, and planted along the rich river valley along the river for an extremely long amount of time. We also recreate in the river. People swim and enjoy the water, and it's refreshing, and there are some beloved swimming holes that are actually warming up that people are getting ready to start going to in the spring. People that leave home, even like I did many years ago, and come back, crave that connection to the river and the water. It is inexplicably meaningful and important that we stay connected to that river and to those lands that surround it. The river has taken care of us not only through food and recreation and even through religious practices, but the river also has been this interesting force and boundary of protection for us as Lumby people. It's a difficult river to cross. It flows through many swamps that are also within our area, and this landscape and the river itself provided a place of refuge for us during very difficult and dangerous eras of our past. One of the interesting things in our connection to the river, not only as Lumby people, but as Southeastern peoples, is we're riparian peoples. We are peoples that live along rivers, who situate our villages and communities along rivers. And inherent to that are our canoe traditions. And our canoe traditions, I don't want to create a single brushstroke, but by and large have waned. And there's lots of reasons for that. There's farms, there's larger colonial communities that were built and then that grew into cities and towns. There were different modes of transportation that prevailed instead of canoeing, and different agents of change kind of impacted our canoe traditions. Recently, for Lumby people and as part of the Museum of the Southeast American Indian, we wanted to re-engage with our canoe traditions and engage with tribes across the state. There are 8 tribes in North Carolina, and we asked them one central question to a project that we titled Life by the River. And this one question is, what do your ancestral waters mean to you? And we've gotten a tremendous range of responses that speak distinctly and uniquely and diversely to each tribe in North Carolina. Part of this project was to build a dugout canoe that was community-centered, and we did that where community from all across the state could come together, native and non-native peoples, to engage with the traditional methods of building a dugout canoe, which is the burn method. We also worked with community to write a canoe song. And the idea was to create an intertribal canoe song that reflected the linguistic families in North Carolina, the Algonquin, Iroquois, and Siouan languages. We took the language and we identified youth, which we felt that was very important, to compose a unified canoe song, this intertribal canoe song. And it's absolutely beautiful. It encompasses the 3 different linguistic families and their language, the language that the tribes selected to go in the song, and with the melody that Layla wrote. And it is just really powerful. When paddling on canoes in the Southeast, we didn't sit in our canoes, we stood in our canoes much like you would a paddleboard. And so to kind of encourage each paddler to keep going, there could be lyrics that spoke to, we're a strong and powerful people, our waters are powerful and meaningful to us. It would speak directly to the waters that they were on, or if they were in different waters, the song might address that. It also unified the importance of working together and teamwork. And other cultural values, and they repeat over and over again. Usually the men, there's a call and response element to the songs that the men start out, and you would have men and women that were paddling canoes, which was really important. So we wanted all of those cultural, traditional, meaningful elements in this intertribal canoe song, one, to bring that back in a way that was meaningful and important to our people, and especially among our youth, and to also reinforce those ideas that our ancestors were using even not that long ago. You're important, you're valuable, your waters and your landscape are important and valuable, and they inform who you are and your identity. And this is uniquely where you come from. As much as you love this place loves you, and our waters care and love for us as well and have taken care of us. So here's a clip of the Life by the River canoe song. We hope that you enjoy it, and thank you.
Hee-oh-hee, 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 hee-oh-hee. Yahweh be'ane, Yahweh be'ane, Maliki chireni nakuse, Emani elinagi, Iswatelik sayak share, Yahweh saga, Yahweh saga, Yahweh. My E-O-E, 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 E-O-E.
Is there anyone present who wants to speak to Miriam at the Nile and water as life-giving?
And as I look at it in my own story, it is true that women, my mother was someone who was strong and demonstrated her faith in the Lord. And there were certain experiences that could have been destructive for me and my siblings, but she was my Miriam. And so I'm grateful for her. But then I also think of surrogate mothers in the church that I grew up in that also encouraged me as a black male and reminded me that although there are vices and devices that could be used to destroy you, God has purpose for you. And so I see them as Miriams in my life, as well as Pharaoh's daughters who nurture. And I'm grateful for that.
I'm drawn to the mother in the story. And I wouldn't have read it that way last year or 4 years ago at the first Freedom Seder or at my first Seder at our home together. And so here the way that Pharaoh's daughter is called to this child to nurse it, to find a way to nourish this child and to bring this child up as her own. It's just I'm reading it now as a mother and that calling as part of it.
During our Seder dinner, we discussed Skandar Boghossian's Night Flight of Dread and Delight, a painting from 1964, and we thought it'd be great to elaborate on the work here in the gallery. Boghossian was an Ethiopian-American painter. He spent some time in Europe, first in London, studying art. He landed in Paris in the mid-20th century, where he was in the circles of the Surrealists, who were really interested in incorporating elements into their work from the inner psyche. They were looking to psychology. They were also looking to their dreams for inspiration. But besides that, Boghossian was really interested in incorporating elements of his own background as an African artist into the work. So a lot of elements referring to Ethiopian religion entered his work as well. So all of these elements kind of come together into his paintings in the mid-20th century. So we have Boghossian in Paris, where he meets an American, Marilyn, a student in Paris, and she's originally from Alabama. They fall in love and arrange to get married back in the United States, and this is in the early 1960s. Boghossian, being relatively a poor artist, arranges to fly to New York, but because he has little money, the flight he takes from New York to Paris is on this cheap Swedish airline that was known at the time to hover just slightly above the Atlantic Ocean. And Boghossian recounts this flight as being horrific. However, he was on his way to get married, so it was also a happy time for the artist, which inspired the painting Night Flight of Dread and Delight. Eventually, Boghossian makes his way to Alabama, to Tuskegee, Alabama, where Marilyn, her father, is a landscape architect at Tuskegee University. And it's while there that Boghossian is kind of taken under the wing of Marilyn's father, and he learns about the university and its aims, but also this is at a moment right after the Civil Rights Act had been signed. So he really gets to understand what's happening in the United States, especially in the South for Black Americans, and this is all influencing his paintings. And we've learned that he actually created Night Flight of Dread and Delight while in Tuskegee in Alabama during this time. So it's an incredible painting with all of these references embedded within it. Boghossian talks about thinking about the Atlantic Ocean as not only harrowing on that flight, but also as a channel or a passage for the transatlantic slave trade and the history that's embedded within the waters, and also thinking, if we think more deeply about that fact, about those who perished in the waters as well. There are a few other paintings from this time period that some art historians, they look at some red splotches in the paintings that might refer to blood. There are a few red splotches in our paintings. If you look closely, you can find them in the underwater area, which is demarcated by, there's a horizon line kind of high up, which we consider to be the water, and above it, above water. We acquired the painting in the early 1990s, which was a coup for us. It's definitely an icon of the collection, and we're happy to share it with you today.
I've invited my friend Angeline. She was featured on the first Freedom Seder. She's a native of Liberia, and I've just invited her to take just a few minutes to talk about, you talked about the reality of the Passover and what that meant for you and your family. And as we are still on this conversation about flights of dread, can you talk about that and what that meant for you?
I'm going to talk about own Passover. So for me, I grew up in Liberia, like I said, and Musa said. I had a pretty normal childhood until 1989, Christmas Eve, when the war took over. So it started from the countryside and came to the city. My mom was in America visiting, so she got stranded in America. She couldn't go back, so we stayed there with our dad. My dad went to go take food to the other side of town to his sisters and got caught. The rebels captured him. Let me make the story short. Yeah, I'll talk a lot, right?
You can take your time.
Okay.
Yeah.
The rebels captured him and he went back that way. So on the bridge, they were about to kill him. So during those days, anybody that kind of looked like you had, and he was not rich, anybody that looked like you had a little bit of money, many rebels were going to kill you. They felt you were eating the government's money. So on the bridge, they told him to take off his clothes. And before he took off his clothes, before they shot him, he said, before you do anything, I want to speak to my God. My dad knelt on the bridge and he lifted his hands up, and he got to the portion that said, "Yea, do I walk?" He said, just in that time, somebody shouted and said, "Don't kill him, don't kill him." My dad felt at the time that probably God himself interceded, because no way the rebels would have known us. We're from the city and these people came from the countryside. Fast forward, they captured him. People told us, say, "Oh, they killed your dad." My dad said, he told God, he said, "God, I need you to send my children a sign to let them know that I'm alive." And my brother had a dream and saw my dad under the tree. So my dad's faith, he has so much faith in God. When he came back to town, we didn't see him again until October 28, 1992. And when we met him, all those years, we told him he had died. So when we got to town, he got to town that day. We're sitting in the room. We heard the bullets again. They started fighting again. Because the war was fought in different sections. So we'll fight, and then it would stop. We'll fight, and then it would stop. The war started again. They started shooting. My dad was like, "Oh, God, not again." I just got home to my children. We started shooting, bombing outside, rocket, grenade, everything. For me, how it became a fast-forward story for me was my dad said, we will all stay in his room and we pray. We prayed that the bullets will fly over. We prayed that God himself, like he did for the children of Israel, will put a doorpost, like the blood on the door, and the rebels will pass over. So we all stayed there and just started praying. We heard people shouting from the other houses. We started praying. And for me, I was born and raised a Christian. My parents were kind of religious. I would say very religious. But for me, I never really understood, because we've all been conditioned to do certain things. I was born and raised Baptist. I was conditioned to pray and do everything. But for me, October 28th, 1992 was when I really felt I met Christ. After praying, all of a sudden I felt this cold presence on me. I was like, ooh. I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. It was just somebody was just holding on to me. Like, I got you. I felt that night was the night I met Christ. Mm-hmm. And I felt so calm. I went to bed. We woke up the next morning after all that fighting. We looked outside. They had pulled people from out of their houses and they skipped us. Mm-hmm. They passed over us. Mm-hmm. Our neighbor pulled them out, killed the whole family, and jump over us. If that's not the Exodus story. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's what in the past for me, because I felt God himself chose us that day to pass us over, skip us.
Hi, my name is Maya Brooks, and I'm the Associate Curator of Contemporary Art here at the North Carolina Museum of Art. And we're standing in my exhibition From Alpha to Creation on view here at the NCMA and also at our sister site in Winston-Salem. And so this exhibition is an overview of different religious expressions throughout the South, especially the Deep South, ranging from North Carolina all the way down into Eastern Texas. One of the through lines that we have in this exhibition is water, and this expression of water in religiosity. So thinking about how water has these different meanings in religion, and it can go from anything positive to purification and rebirth and giving, and there's also the idea of taking, though, this kind of negative connotation of water, where water is seen as this powerful force that can take life. It can also be seen as a cleansing tool, a tool that connects people to nature through their religious expression. And so we have some different pieces in the exhibition that feature water very, very specifically, and so I want to cover those with you all. The first two pieces that we have here are by Allison Janae Hamilton. She's an artist from North Florida, and these photos depict her in character, wearing white, fully immersed in water, which is a central theme that we see a lot of times in contemporary art that features religion and the idea of water as well. This idea of submersion, this idea of giving yourself to water, giving yourself to nature, and what that means and the power that is held in that. In these two photos, you see Allison Janae Hamilton donning this white gown, and it flows around her and kind of billows around her, so that she's literally giving herself to the forces of water around her. I think a big part of this for me, as I look at it, is this interpretation of birthing or purification, this idea of water cleansing the body, cleansing the soul, cleansing the spirit, that we see in a lot of religious art and religious depiction. Another example of this is actually in a film we have here in the galleries called Deep Waters, which was taken here in North Carolina, right in Durham. In this film, you see people of different religious expressions, including hoodoo and ancestral worship, who are also giving themselves to water. They wear white paint on their skin, and they submerge themselves as they sing, and they give themselves, and they think about water as this vessel. So another work we have on view is by artist Ralph Burns, which depicts a baptism done here in North Carolina in a river. And in that photograph, what water represents is transition. It also represents identification. For a lot of folks, people will recognize water's role in baptisms as a way to connect believers to their religious identity in a lot of ways. And it can have its own interpretations, identifications, but it's all symbolic within these works. And so water really connects different religions and different religious expressions throughout our region. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from this topic.
Minna was going to share a piece from the collection too. Is it?
Okay, yes, I am. So as a...
I'm going to officially
Oh.
anoint you.
Thank you. Thank you. So one of my joys of being a docent is getting to see what works of art in the museum the public is drawn to. And one of those works is a work by a prominent Cuban artist named Yon Capote. I hope I'm saying that right. And it's called Isla. And it's over in the other building. And you'll see it down here on the bottom right. It is a rather large seascape. The top is just very, very thick paint with gray, dark, ominous clouds. And then you'll see that the bottom, 80% of the painting is very, very dark. The ocean is very, very dark. And people will see it in the older building and from up far away, and you'll notice they'll get closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, look at this, because the bottom part is all fish hooks. And there are thousands and thousands of fish hooks there, ranging from a very tiny size to a very large size. And my husband and I were lucky enough to be able to travel to Cuba with a small group to help support artists about 5 years ago. And this painting had been acquired by the museum just before then. I didn't really understand until one is physically in Cuba what life is like and what this painting represented. For me, growing up in Philadelphia and having the luxury of spending the summers at the New Jersey shore, the ocean has always been, walking along the ocean, jumping into the ocean has always been one of the happiest places I've been. And being able to live here in North Carolina and continue to do that is a real joy. That's, if I ever want to de-stress, going for a walk and getting my feet wet in the ocean is amazing. But for the Cubans, many of whom survived by fishing, and now are only permitted a small amount of gasoline in their fishing boats because the government doesn't want them to be able to go somewhere else. Instead, the ocean, which would normally hold promise for them, now just holds limitations and fear and confinement. And we have so many things in the world, so many peoples to be worried about now, and then we forget that some people have lived in poverty and huge limitations and confinement and lack of freedom for so many years. So it's a very powerful painting.
Do you know, it's interesting when you said that, I thought about how for, when I look at, and I think it's definitely changing with generations, but I think historically the water has been a source of fear for Black people because of the Middle Passage, and then, so many Black people didn't learn to swim. My father still doesn't know how to swim. My mom learned at a later age, and we see that changing obviously with my husband and I, with our children. But it's interesting how when you talked about about in Cuba, the water not being a source of freedom, it's a source of fear, or or a place of pain. And I think it's also held true for for the African American culture as well.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Art. Today we are diving into the fascinating world of Maya culture and exploring one of the most intriguing artifacts, the Maya ball game marker. Now, what makes this marker truly special is its connection to waterscapes, a theme deeply ingrained in ball courts buildings. Classic Maya ball courts were like our modern sports stadiums. They were common in big cities and came in all shapes and sizes. Some were simple, with just 2 platforms forming a playing area. In one version of the game, players try to hit a rubber ball with their bodies, scoring points by hitting stones along the court center. This piece was that stone. Inside we can see one of the hero twins. In ancient stories, 2 important characters are known as Xbalanque and Hunahpu, the hero twins. These twins were clever and brave, and they embarked in many incredible journeys, like trying to bring their father back to life. The hero twins were skilled at hunting and playing games, especially the ball game. Both symbolize the sun and moon. Look closely, this part is the glyph, a kind of symbol for the moon. The symbol for the moon in ancient Maya drawings combines different elements like corn, caves, and the idea of death. These elements are all linked to the moon's cycle. The symbol looks like a curved shape, like a crescent moon, which you often see in pictures around the world. The moon symbols can be shown in 2 ways, a full crescent and a half crescent. Sometimes it draws enclosing a figure which represents the moon goddess. She was believed to live in a cool, wet cave. People thought of the moon goddess cave as a special place like a cenote or watery cave. That's why the moon symbol looks like a crescent made of bone, similar to the symbol of a cave. One part of the symbol represents death, but also has circles that symbolize maize, seeds showing the moon's role in helping crops grow. The moon goddess and the maize god were seen as similar in some ways. They both were thought to live in caves and help farmers. The moon goddess was seen as the first female ancestors, and some people still call the moon our father-grown mother today. The crescent symbol is full of meanings. For example, it also relates to the jaw symbol. Imagine a picture of a big open jawbone, like the mouth of an animal. This symbol is fundamental in ancient Maya drawing. It represents places like caves and sinkholes filled with water. They believed these places were like doors to another worlds and were very special. It shows that the place is both enclosed like inside a cave and a doorway to somewhere else like a portal. Sometimes the sharp parts at the ends looks like the teeth of a centipede, which the Maya thought was a symbol of death and change. An essential idea is when the Maya drew the jaw symbols, they often added pictures of water to show that these places were full of life-giving water. They believed these spots were fundamental for growing crops and bringing rain. However, as time went on, the Maya drawing of these symbols changed. They simplified them and added jewels to them, which showed that the symbol was related to places like sinkholes that were common in the Maya's home area.
So I'll be reading a passage from Numbers. The Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Zin on the first new moon, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. The community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses, saying, "If only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of the Lord. Why have you brought the Lord's congregation into this wilderness for us and our beasts to die here? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There is not even water to drink." Moses and Aaron came away from the congregation to the entrance of the tent meeting and fell on their faces. The presence of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "You and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts." Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he had commanded them. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels shall get water for you out of this rock." And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them. Those are the waters of Meribah," meaning the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, through which he affirmed his sanctity.
It's a very strange passage with respect to Miriam. At the very beginning of it, she dies. And it leads with no explanation into this long passage, this long description about she dies, then there's the lack of water. And in rabbinic tradition, or in Jewish tradition, trying to make sense of this, they understand this juxtaposition as meaning that while Miriam was alive, there was water. That in the wilderness, the 40 years of trekking in that barren spot on earth called the Sinai Peninsula, that there's no natural water. But as long as Miriam was there with her two brothers leading this long trek, that there was water and that the people could survive. So the death of Miriam meant all of a sudden there would be no water. Now, one of the traditional aspects of the Seder is a cup filled with wine, and it's called the cup of Elijah, of Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet. And he's a biblical character who doesn't die. He goes to heaven in the chariots of fire. We all know that wonderful passage. So he's there representing the hopes for redemption in the future. He. But there's another kind of liquid that's very important that is represented in this wonderful piece of art that our museum now has. It's according to traditional interpretation of this verse that we've just heard, this passage we've just heard, is Miriam's water. And so beginning, I believe in the 1980s, some feminist Jewish women in Boston decided to have two cups at the Seder table. The cup of wine, Elijah's cup, representing the future and the hopes and messianic aspirations, but Miriam's cup with water, not wine, because we can probably live without wine. Well, maybe some of us can. He can't. But we can't live without water. And so we drink the cup, Miriam's cup. It now appears in some Seders, not all of them. I don't know if you have a Miriam, well, you of course have a Miriam cup. But that, and where you drink from it in the order of the Seder varies. And some people like to kind of bookend it. Miriam's cup at the beginning and Elijah's cup at the end. Miriam's cup representing the present, representing life, representing what we all need in order to survive on this planet. And Elijah's cup at the end looking towards the future, what we hope will come in the days as we move forward. The peace and the lack of violence and the understanding of all people that so far is not as prevalent as we would like. So this is part of the evolution of the Passover story, so that it takes the theme of the past of freedom and makes it something to be strived for all peoples in every generation. And I think that we have to continue to do this, to evolve and to incorporate elements that allow us to be inclusive and forward-looking and celebratory of the life-giving aspects of our present day.
So we're going to close with a song, and this segment is called Water as Life Sustaining. And as we were trying to figure out where we would involve music, it was my hope, and I shared with Sean, that we would pause and we would think about the journey from struggle and slavery through liberation and freedom, and we would think about where we need that as humanity, but also in our own individual worlds. And this song came, it is a hymn called Great Is Thy Faithfulness, which I think we can see, or I clearly see in this story. And at this time, we will conclude with Ron Cornelis and Dr. Tiffany Bennett Cornelis.
Great